We've already looked at a lot of the parent functions we're going to be using this year. Additionally, we want to look at one called the step function. This is a visual of what the step function looks like on a graph. Notice the function is f of x equals, and then the step function is written with these two brackets and an x. A step function is a piecewise function containing all constant pieces. The constant pieces are observed across adjacent intervals of the function as they change from one value to the next. A step function is discontinuous or not continuous, so that means that you cannot draw a step function without removing your pencil from your paper. The step function is also called the greatest integer function. The greatest integer function returns the largest integer less than or equal to x for all real numbers x. The intervals on the greatest integer function can be expressed as n to n plus 1, where n is included and n plus 1 is not included. Notice that you have closed circles on the left-hand side of each step and open circles on the right-hand side of each step to express that interval. The value of the function on each of these intervals will be n. The function is constant in each of these intervals. Essentially, the greatest integer function rounds down a real number to the nearest integer. So let's talk about some characteristics of the greatest integer function. The domain of this function is from negative infinity to positive infinity, or all real numbers. The range is also from negative infinity to positive infinity, or all real numbers. This function has a y-intercept at 0, 0, and has x-intercepts in the interval from 0 included up until 1 not included. The graph is constant between each pair of consecutive integers, and the graph jumps vertically 1 unit at each integer value. So let's look at how we actually evaluate using this function. Given f of x equals the greatest integer function, find the following, starting with f of 2.1. So looking at our graph at 2.1, that would be about here. Our function value is at 2. So f of 2.1 is just 2. Remember, this function takes any real number and rounds it down to the nearest integer. Let's do the same for f of 3.5. Again, 3.5 is going to take that real number and round it down to the nearest integer, so 3. F of 9.7 is going to round that down to 9. Okay, we just want to look at a few more examples where we are evaluating the same question. Given the greatest integer function, we want to find the following, starting with f of 1/10. So here we want to find the greatest integer less than or equal to 1/10. Using our graph, we know 1/10 would be about here. So the greatest integer function is going to round that down to 0. We also want to look at f of -1. So this is where it's important to note that we're looking for the greatest integer less than or equal to. So because -1 is already an integer, no need to round. This equals -1. And finally, we want to look at f of -1/2. So again, on our graph, we can look at -1/2 being about here. We're rounding that down to the nearest integer, so this would round down to -1. I hope this video was helpful in understanding the step function. If you have any additional questions, you can reach out to your teacher.